Hi, my name is Eric Ryan Solberg. Merry Christmas and welcome to this week's episode of 7-Minute Sermons. I was going to plan on talking about Christmas this entire 7-minute sermon, but in light of what happened last Friday in Newtown, Connecticut, and the feelings I've had in my own heart and some questions I've received from fellow believers and non-believers alike, I want to spend the bulk of this, and I'll get to Christmas, a brief message on Christmas and a brief message on the Mayan thing at the very end. But I want to spend the bulk of this talking about why, if God is good, do bad things happen. And especially, why do bad things happen to people who are good or innocent or even faithful? This works on a personal level because we've all, by this age, have experienced some level of sorrow in our lives, whether it's the loss of a loved one or a parent or a sibling or a coach or a teacher, or it's just an illness or injury or hardship or trial. We've all gone through it, and it's really easy to lose faith in God and to have doubts when you're going through those, and not understand how a good and faithful, loving God could let bad things happen. And I think furthermore, it's Christianity becomes a target in times like this sometimes, because people are like, well, if your God is as good as you claim He is, and we all would claim He is good, every church in America should be claiming that we serve a good and sovereign Lord, then He would never let something like this happen, so God can exist. So I want to dispel that, but I want to first start by assuring you that if you have doubts or have questions in these times of your life when you're going through heartache, or when you see it on a national level, whether it's a terrorist attack or a mass shooting or a natural disaster, that it's okay to have those questions. It's okay to wonder. And hopefully I'll answer some of them tonight. And there's a couple reasons why I think something bad sometimes happens. And it can be used in any circumstance, whether it's a personal circumstance or a natural disaster, or I'm going to specifically reference what happened last Friday. But the number one thing you have to understand is we live in a sinful, fallen, and evil world. Okay? As soon as Adam took the forbidden apple, sin was introduced into the world, and we no longer live in a pure world. So bad things happen to good people. Okay? We live in a fallen world where calamities happen. And I want to focus on a passage from Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 11 through 12. And I wrote in the margin in my Bible next to this, life's not fair. Here's a Bible passage that illustrates that. It says, "Again I saw," this is Solomon writing, "Again I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful, but time and chance happen to them all. For no one can anticipate the time of disaster. Like fish taken in a cruel net, and like birds caught in a snare, so mortals are snared at a time of calamity when it falls suddenly upon them." So there's just a little briefing, and this is Solomon's understanding several thousand years ago. And he understands that time and chance happens to everybody under the sun, that everybody is subject to this world, and we have to understand that we live in a fallen and evil world. Let's not forget that 6 chapters into the whole Bible, 6 chapters into Genesis, the world is so evil that God floods it. He's so embarrassed, he even shows regret in chapter 6 of Genesis, if you read it, for creating humankind, because it's so evil that he decides to flood the entire world, save Noah and his family. So we have to understand that if God so chooses to let something bad happen to try and get our attention so we can see how wretched we are, that's His prerogative. And I'm not saying that's what happened, but that would be His prerogative. I also want to say, so number one, you have to understand that we live in a fallen world where bad things happen to good people. The temptations of Satan are strong. Okay? Especially to somebody who may have had a mental illness and cannot discern for themselves between right or wrong. You don't think Satan is going to, and this is not getting play in national media, people aren't talking about Satan's power, but let's face it, Satan has real power in this world. He has power in your life, he has power in mine, because we're all sinners and we all fall short of the glory of God. So we deserve whatever consequence is to befall us, but if this shooter is suffering from some kind of mental illness, he's going to be more easily subjected to Satan's wrath. And I'm willing to bet that God tried to speak into his life and tried to stop him. I'm willing to bet when you sin and when I sin, sometimes we know it's wrong, but we choose to do things anyways. And we may not have a mental illness, but it's not like God tried to let this happen. And that's what I want you to understand first and foremost, is that God did not want for this to happen. And I want you to know that God's heart definitely breaks when He sees His children, whether they're young kindergartners or first graders or teachers, they're all His children. When He sees them suffering and dying, His heart breaks for that. I'm confident of that. And I'm also confident that when Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, let the little children come to me because the kingdom of heaven belongs to them, that he meant it. And so I'm sure that his heart breaks when he sees 20 of his children, kids, slain. His heart breaks for the evil that's in this world. I'm 100% positive of it. But I don't want you or people to say, well, God is so good, so how can he let this happen? I'm sure that he tried to stop it. He was on the shooter's heart, and in every situation he's going to try, but we have to understand that the forces of Satan are strong. And I also want to say that even in this tragedy, and my heart breaks for those kids as a big brother who drops his brother off at school last Friday, the day it happened. And if you're a brother or sister or parent, or even if you have any heart at all, your heart breaks for what happened in the tragedy. I'm not trying to jeopardize that or trivialize it or minimize it, because it was monumentous. But God is going to use it for his glory. And that's really hard to understand, but there's no doubt in my mind that through this tragedy, that people are going to come to know Jesus, and people are going to come to know his glory. Our own president, who is normally fairly protective of his faith and doesn't share a lot about it, and isn't very boisterous and doesn't voice his faith very much, quoted from the New Testament, not just the Old Testament, the New Testament twice, once from the Gospel and once from 2 Corinthians in his speech. There's stories of these heroes that saved lives, and there's no doubt that God was there. So people are always wondering, well, where was God? How can he let this happen? Well, it could just be that in this case, Satan had such a strong grip on this guy that God tried his best and it didn't work, and so he allowed it to happen for the sake of sharing his glory through a tragedy. It could have happened because maybe he was trying to wake up society. I'm not going to go as far to say, oh, well, if America was a more Christ-centered society and there was prayer in school, that this wouldn't have happened. No, I'm not going to say that. But maybe it is a wake-up call that, hey, we live in a culture that's completely rejecting Christian values. Maybe that has something to do with it. But once again, I'm not going to go out there and say that that's the reason this happened. It's important to remember that we live in a fallen world where spiritual warfare happens all the time, and Satan is trying to pull you and me and everybody in this world towards his grasp. But it's immensely important in this time to realize and understand that all things work together for the glory of God and for those who love him and are called according to his purpose, as it says in Romans 8:28. And it's important to note the final score, which is God's going to triumph over evil at the end. We forget that we're living in a battle where there's sin in this world and Satan reigns on this earth. But ultimately in the heavens and in our hearts, God reigns. So I just want to encourage you with that, and I hope that kind of answered a little bit of your question. Maybe it didn't at all. And once again, my thoughts and prayers are with those people struggling. And in your life, you're going to face trials and adversity, maybe not in that magnitude, but you might lose a parent. And you always have the choice. You can blame God and run away from him, or you can draw close to him in that time and understand that even when you don't understand, God is working through those situations. And like I said, there's no doubt that God's on the ground working in Connecticut. There's no doubt that I think he tried to prevent what happened, but Satan had a strong pull on this guy. But there's no doubt that through this tragedy, people are going to come to know Jesus, and I think already have. And it's always encouraging and nice to see God talked about in the national media, and see prayer services televised, and see our president quoting from the Bible. That's immensely important. But whatever storm you go through, you might have that question of, gosh, why would God, if God is so good, why would this happen to me? And you have to find peace in that God knows what he's doing. He's going to work it out for your good and his glory. So with that, I hope that helped a little bit, and I hope I didn't say anything that stepped on too many people's toes, and that's just how I feel about it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to mention a little bit about Christmas, because Christmas is a great time. It's a very celebratory time, but it's also a tough time sometimes, because Christmas is a time where you might look around the dinner table and see that there's a place empty because of a loved one who's passed on, or maybe just isn't able to make it home, or might be serving our country overseas, or whatever the case may be. And so it can be a hard time. And Christmas is often a reminder of how little money you might have, or how lonely you might be, or as you start a new year, the lack of direction that you might have. And so in this dark time, if it's a dark time for you, I want you to remember that that's the time that Jesus came into this world. Jesus didn't come into a well-lit Holiday Inn Express Jesus came in a manger, maybe dimly lit by a couple of candles in the middle of the night. Jesus came at a time where there was darkness of Roman oppression under the ruler Herod in Israel. He came into a time that was in desperate need of a Savior. And he showed up in the form, God sent a star so that the wise men would know where to go. And I think he still does that in our lives. So if you're in the middle of darkness, remember that's where Jesus came into. That's the time that Jesus came into. And this Christmas, whatever adversity you're going through, whatever heartache you feel, loneliness, Jesus will show up in that darkness if you let him. So that's my little word on Christmas. It's a joyous time, but it can be really a trying time. But I just want you to remember that Jesus is there, and Jesus is the reason we celebrate Christmas. And furthermore, people are talking about this Mayan thing. Look, the Bible makes it pretty clear that no one knows the hour of the day that Christ is going to return. But it is a good reminder that we should, number one, be expectant and joyful that as we celebrate Christ's birth, that we should look forward to his return. Just like the apostles do when he ascends to heaven, and they think it's going to be more imminent, and it's been 2,000 years. We should look forward to it. And maybe things in this world are going more towards Christ's return being more and more imminent. I don't know. But we should look forward to it with urgency and live with urgently and live passionately and rejoice and get excited for his return. We should be waiting expectantly. And because of that, I want you to know that if you have not, I'm fairly confident the world's not going to end tomorrow. But it is one more day we come closer to Christ's return. And there's no time that's better than right now to give your heart to Jesus. So if you don't have that personal relationship with Jesus, you can refer to some of my earlier sermons and get in touch with me about that. And I would love to talk to you about Jesus. And it's pretty easy how to develop a basic relationship with him and accept him into your heart and become saved. And then there's nothing to worry about. You know, Paul actually writes in one of his epistles that he's torn between staying on this earth or departing because he's so excited to get to heaven. And in chapter 1 of one of his epistles, I can't think of it off the top of my head. I'll find it for next week. So I just want to encourage you that even if the world may not be ending tomorrow, it could be imminent. And there's no time to waste in accepting Jesus Christ into your life and making him Lord of your life. So that's my 2 cents. I hope you guys all have a Merry, Merry, Merry Christmas. Please be safe, stay healthy, and enjoy time with family if you're able to have it. And just remember that no matter what season you're walking through, whatever darkness, that's where Jesus showed up on Christmas. It was a dark time. And we're in a dark time right now as our nation. You might be in your personal life. And that's when we should expect Jesus to show up most. So here are my prayers. Please feel free to get in touch with me whatever way you can. And I would love to talk more with you about Jesus and answer any questions you have. Hopefully I'll do another one of these next week. Until then, remember to live in the world and not of the world. I'm Eric Ryan Stolberg, this 7-minute sermons. Merry Christmas. I'll see you soon. God bless.